What if you were the only human left? This morning, the alarm went off the way it always does. You opened your eyes, reached for your phone, and looked at the screen. Today, that phone is dead. The street lights outside are off. The traffic noise is gone. You walk to the window, and there's nothing. No engines, no voices, no movement on any street, in any window, anywhere your eyes can reach. For 300,000 years, the worst part of being human has always been other humans. War, heartbreak, loud neighbors. But not once, in any society that has ever existed, has a single person been truly alone. Even hermits chose to leave a world they knew was still there. Now imagine the world isn't there. What actually happens to you? Not the dramatic version with the screaming and the broken windows, the real version. The first year, the first decade, the rest of your life. The answer is documented, and it's not what most people would guess. Let's start with the first day. Within hours of confirming you're alone, your body begins to do something strange. In 2007, social psychologist John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago published a study showing that the perception of social isolation activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. Not metaphorically, literally. The brain regions that light up when you break a bone are the same ones that light up when you believe nobody is coming. This system evolved for a reason. For most of human history, being separated from your group meant death within days. Your ancestors who panicked when they got lost survived long enough to find their way back. The ones who stayed calm got eaten. So your brain treats isolation as an injury that needs treating immediately. There is no group to return to. The pain doesn't shut off. Now skip forward. 2 weeks in. You've found food. You've stopped expecting the lights to come back on. You think you've adapted. You haven't. In 1972, a French scientist named Michel Sifflet lowered himself into a cave in Texas with no clock, no sunlight, and no contact with the surface. He stayed for 6 months. He kept a journal. When researchers brought him back up, they compared his journal to the actual calendar. Sifflet had lost a full month. His brain, with no external rhythm to anchor to, had quietly stretched and compressed time without telling him. He thought he was on day 151. It was day 179. He could not feel the gap. You won't either. Without other people, your internal clock unhooks from the world. Days blur. You will sit down to eat lunch and realize when you stand up that it has somehow become night. You'll wake up unsure whether you slept for 4 hours or 14. Time, which you thought of as something the universe did to you, turns out to be something other people did to you. With them gone, it goes too. Researchers studying isolated polar workers have found the same pattern. Within a few months, the calendar becomes a story they tell themselves instead of something they live in. But here's what's stranger. Your language starts to disappear. In 2008, when the last fluent speaker of the Akabo language died on an island in the Indian Ocean, linguists who had studied her in her final years documented something they hadn't expected. In the decade before her death, with no one left to speak Akabo with, her own vocabulary in her own language had begun to shrink. She forgot words she had used since childhood. The grammar slipped. She started filling gaps with the trade language she used with outsiders. A language with no listeners erodes inside the last speaker. You will lose words. Within a year, you'll notice. Within 5 years, the inner voice you've used to narrate your entire life will sound thinner, looser, less precise. By 10 years, you will struggle to think the kinds of thoughts you used to think effortlessly, because the words those thoughts were made of will be gone. And then the mind starts filling the silence on its own. In sensory deprivation studies run at McGill University in the 1950s, volunteers placed in quiet, featureless rooms for just a few days began to hallucinate. Voices, faces, conversations with people who weren't there. The brain, deprived of social input, didn't shut off the social machinery. It started running it on imagined input instead. You'll see them. People you knew, people you didn't. Sometimes a child you never had. Sometimes a stranger who looks at you from across a room. You will know they aren't real, and it will not matter. Your brain will produce them because it was built to live among others, and it cannot rewrite itself fast enough to accept that there are no others left. This is the part nobody talks about. You will not lose your mind in a dramatic way. You will lose it slowly, in pieces small enough that you don't notice any single one. The pain of isolation dulls into a permanent baseline. Time loosens. Language thins. Imaginary people arrive. And eventually, the thing inside your head that used to be a person interacting with other people becomes something else. Something quieter. Something that has forgotten what it was for. In 2013, a man named Christopher Knight was arrested in the woods of central Maine. He had walked into the forest in 1986 at the age of 20 and lived alone for 27 years, speaking to no one. When police questioned him, he could still talk, but he told them the only word he had spoken out loud in nearly 3 decades was the word "hi," said once to a hiker in the 1990s. Knight described his time in the woods as peaceful, but he also said something that journalists kept returning to. He said he had lost his identity, not in a poetic way. He meant that the person he had been at 20 had quietly dissolved during those years, and the person sitting in the interview room was something the forest had made out of what was left. He had been alone for 27 years in a country full of people, just a few miles from a road. Imagine what happens when there is no road, no country, no one anywhere. Here's the part almost nobody understands. You were never really an individual, not the way you think you are. You are a node in a network of other humans, and the thing you call yourself is mostly the shape that network presses into you. Your sense of humor came from someone. Your taste came from someone. The voice in your head learning to speak got its first words from someone. Take the network away, and what's left isn't a smaller version of you. It's something else. A loose collection of habits and hungers wearing your face. This is why solitary confinement is considered torture. It isn't the lack of comfort. It's the slow uncoupling of a person from the thing that made them a person. International human rights organizations classify isolation beyond 15 days as a form of psychological harm that may never fully heal. The threshold was set after decades of research on prisoners, hostages, and astronauts. After 15 days, measurable cognitive damage begins. After 30, the personality starts to shift in ways that don't reverse. You would have a lifetime. So the real question isn't what you would do if you were the only human left. The real question is how long you would still be human at all. The truth is, you wouldn't die. The body is durable. You'd find food. You'd find shelter. You might live another 40 or 50 years. But the version of you that woke up that first morning, the one who looked out the window and felt afraid, would not make it to the end. Something else would. Something that wears your body and walks your streets and looks at sunsets and has forgotten, slowly, year by year, what sunsets were for. You are not alone right now. Somewhere, someone is thinking about you. Someone remembers your name. Hold on to that. It's more of you than you know.